Alright guys, like promised, I'm going to give you a presentation on Dr. Bursiak's model of allostasis. So it is an introduction to allostasis, and it is a remedy for organizational homeostasis that has been devastated by a turbulent environment. So before we could understand what allostasis is, we have to understand what homeostasis is. So homeostasis comes from biology, and it is the tendency to maintain a stable equilibrium between interdependent variables or elements. So what that means is, for instance, you have a temperature, your body regulates your temperature so the fever drops, and then you continue your daily activities in your life. Within a business, it is to achieve organizational stability through consistency. So what that means is, we're not certain what's going to happen in the external environment, but some kind of dysfunction will happen. Our organization is going to fix that dysfunction, and then we are going to return back to how the process of our organization was running. Nothing's going to change. We are just going to consistently do what we've been doing in the past. This is better explained in Dr. Bursiak's work. So, organizational homeostasis establishes optimal equilibrium by facilitating the functions of any organization, but for this purpose, it requires organizational well-being and a relatively stable environment. This is in regard to homeostasis still. Next, however, the occurrence of turbulences in the contemporary environment usually destroys organizational homeostasis. So homeostasis is going to be destroyed because we don't know, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. And then an unbalanced state of an organization caused by the rapid environmental changes usually results in deviations in the form of organizational dysfunction. So again, those dysfunctions are there, the organization is not going to be at its prime, something bad's going to happen because we can't stay at that consistent level. Here we have to think about allostasis, and allostasis is very similar to homeostasis. It's derived from that term, but the major difference is that it's going to achieve stability and equilibrium through change. So instead of through consistency, it's going to be through change. Again, it's an expansion of homeostasis. Instead of consistency, it's change now that we're trying to get to that stable and equal ground. So from Dr. Bursiak's work, better explained, allostasis helps to achieve organizational stability or equilibrium through organizational change, like I mentioned earlier. And to a certain degree, organizational allostasis is an extension to organizational homeostasis through its ability to adapt organizations to the challenges that occur within the business realm. Okay, so FOCT is an organization, and it's an example based off of Dr. Bursiak's model. FOCT, he observed it for 32 years, so it initially started in 1982, and then the observation stopped in 2014. There was a variety of organizational situations, like in any company that's 32 years, there's going to be some ups and some downs, and then we are going to see what happened and why it still was profitable and why the organization is still running today. And again, I will focus on the difference between allostasis and homeostasis, and why it was necessary to have allostasis within the organization to be sustainable rather than homeostasis. The model itself is an image of organizational reality. You could present this model to any organization and see how it's going to work with that organization, why allostasis is so important within that organization, because we need that change. We can't just assume that everything in the world is going to be the exact same year after year after year. We have to continuously be changing. Therefore, we might have to change something externally or internally, like our management or the structure of the organization. Within the model, there are 3 phases, and those phases are successive. So phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. Phase 1 is the best phase to be into. That's where you want your company to always be. However, because of the turbulent environment, we might enter into phase 2 or even phase 3, and when we're in phase 3, it's really, really terrifying. The way that we re-enter into phase 2 or phase 1, if we are in phase 3, is through adaptation, which also means through change. So overall, this is the model. So the model is broken up in those 3 different phases. All the way on the left-hand side, phase 1, on the right-hand side, phase 3. The name of the model is The Organization's Life Cycle of Organizational Effectiveness Influenced by Dysfunctions. So the model focuses on 2 things, the effectiveness and the dysfunction. dysfunctions. So this is the first part, so phase 1, and here we're focusing on the dysfunctions. So all the way to the left-hand side, it says complete absence of dysfunctions. So that's when we're in the column A. A all the way to the F is just a scale of how the dysfunctions are presented. So A, no dysfunctions at all, and then when we get to F, there are dysfunctions, and we're on that order of entering phase 2, where it gets kind of dangerous. But however, in phase 1, no matter what, the company is still effective. So it's running effectively no matter where you are in phase 1, and that's why it's so necessary to stay in phase 1. Again, this is the lower part of the model talking about the effectiveness, and we have the scale from A to F. A meaning that it's extremely effective, maximum effectiveness, and then F, it's getting to that critical level that we might enter into phase 2 where it's ineffective. And we don't want to get there because your company's not going to be effective. Phase 2, here we have dysfunctions. No matter what, we have dysfunctions within our organization, whether it's internal or external. And now we're on that scale again. Are we in A or are we all the way to F? And it's an acceleration of those dysfunctions. So the dysfunctions are present, it's just how the magnitude, the intensity of those dysfunctions. Phase 2 in relationship to effectiveness, when you enter phase 2, it's ineffective. So your company is ineffective, it's not running properly. However, the great thing about phase 2, it's reversible. So even though you enter into phase 2, you have the possibility to go back to phase 1, and then your company again will be effective and running smoothly. Phase 3 is the scary area. This is the phase that your company might be getting close to bankruptcy or liquidation. So dysfunctions are present and they're chaotic. No matter what, it's kind of like the snowball effect. So one dysfunction you might fix, but there's another one. That dysfunction you might fix, but there's another one. So it's a snowball and there's more and more and more dysfunctions. Again, almost like you might fall into bankruptcy or liquidation. Here, talking about effectiveness, again, it's ineffective, your company is running ineffectively, and it's irreversible. So it's very, very hard to get back into phase 2 or phase 1. I'm not saying it's impossible. You just have to take extra, extreme measures to go back into those 2 phases. And those measures have to be some kind of change. Whether it's external change or internal change, again, changing that management, changing the structure of your company, maybe changing your product, maybe changing your marketing, some kind of change has to happen. Okay, also within the effectiveness, there are certain things that were written, and initially it was just a general idea. So Dr. Bursiak was writing this and it was a general idea of what effectiveness was. However, we had to get into that mindset of allostasis. So how are we going to change our mindset and how are we going to change how we view our organization for it to be successful and always be optimal? So initially, he wrote limitless prospects for organizational growth and development within the bounds of possibility. And with that mindset, with that shift, it turned into limitless possibilities to sustain effectiveness. So we're in phase 1. So no matter what, remember in phase 1, we're effective. So we're trying to sustain that effectiveness. No matter what we do, we might have to have a couple of shifts, but we are still going to be effective. So we have limitless possibilities of how that effectiveness is going to stay. Then we're moving on to phase 2. It initially read considerably limited prospects for organizational growth and development. And then we switched over with that mindset, limitless possibilities to restore effectiveness. So now remember we're in phase 2, so it says that we are ineffective. So now we need to restore that effectiveness. Now we need to start thinking about what can we do within our organization to go from ineffective back to effective where we were in phase 1. And then the last one, it initially read in phase 3, organizational suspension, which makes survival improbable without unusual means, and it switched over to limited and restricted possibilities to restore effectiveness. So again, when we're in phase 3, you have to do something extremely drastic to get back into phase 2. Once you're in phase 2, you have a little bit more wiggle room, and your hopes are getting back to phase 1. So back to FOCT. This is the organization that Dr. Bursiak was observing, and we had those 32 years. So from 82 all the way to 2014, there was observations of what was happening within the company. As you guys can see, the majority of the company was in phase 1, which is great. However, there was an instance that it jumped into phase 2, which is terrifying, and it almost was in phase 3, which could have been the threat of liquidation or bankruptcy. So at the beginning, the company, in '82, it started on the border of phase 1 and phase 2. Like any company, when you start, there's always going to be some kind of problems. There's always going to be some kind of shift that you have to make. With that allostasis mindset, they were able to make those shifts, and they were able to drop down that intensity all the way to A, where the company was running fully effective. Then in the next years, there was a systematic change, so something that happened higher up, whether resources were limited, they may have gotten more taxes, something happened for that shift to go from A all the way to D. And again, they had to change some kind of strategy. They had to do something to revert back and hopefully get towards A, B, and C in that effective scaling. Then in the very ending, from 2004 to 2009, the services that FOC was providing were no longer needed. No matter what they were trying to do, no matter what they were trying to shift, for some reason, no one needed their services anymore. And then in 2009 to 2010, there was a huge downfall, and it jumped from phase 1 all the way to the end of phase 2. Here, the owner of FOC had to take a step back and was like, my management isn't working, my strategy is not working, my structure is not working, there's so many disturbances, the turbulent environment is just destroying my entire company, what do I do? So he had to think about it, and he had to change something drastically. So he went from being the owner of his own company, and he decided to become a subcontractor. So his entire idea, his entire strategy of running this business shifted. When he became a subcontractor, it took some of the responsibility off his shoulders, and then no matter what, he was going to get paid, or some kind of profit was going to be given to him. So then he went back down, and then in 2011, it was fully effective, it worked out very well, and again, with starting something new, there's going to be some kind of dysfunctions, but little by little, he was still in that phase 1 zone, which means that his company, again, is running fully effective. Okay, so thinking about allostasis, and when you're in these different phases, what do you have to do, and what's so important with allostasis in mind in these phases? So number 1, maintain complete organizational vigilance in detecting even the weakest dysfunctions. So even if there's a tiny dysfunction, figure out what it is and then fix it. So that's the second point. So immediately after identifying that dysfunction, take measures to neutralize the dysfunctions. Then try to achieve significant and ongoing improvements in organizational performance and competitiveness. And then if you find yourself in phase 2, again, have that mindset of allostasis, and then take all available measures to prevent entry into phase 3. So no matter what, you don't want to enter phase 3. Once you've taken those like preventative measures, you can focus on coming back to phase 1. So focus on reversing unfavorable organizational tendencies, which will help you get back to phase 1, and then improve organizational position within phase 2. The last phase, phase 3, concentrate on stopping the threat and reversing dangerous trends, accumulate and apply effectively all necessary organizational endeavors that are only achievable by extraordinary means in the purpose to return to phase 2 and potentially even 1. But again, remember in phase 3, it's really, really hard. You have to take extreme measures to get back to phase 2 and potentially even get back to phase 1. So the reason why FOC was successful was because the owner had this allostatic mindset and believed that no matter what, when dysfunctions were presented, he had to change his mindset, he had to change something within his company, management, structure, whatever it was, to continue growing. So permanent allostatic actions means no matter what, in any organization that you have, make sure that you're always changing. Our world nowadays is very progressive, so it's always going to be changing. Therefore, you also have to change your mindset. You can't just believe that what worked yesterday is always going to work for the next coming years. And then there's the lack of homeostasis, because again, what I just said, you can't think that what once worked is always going to work. So that's allostasis, that's Dr. Bursiak's model, and that's all I have.
Cut or continue?
Thank you. Do you have questions? Do you know what is it? How it works? Renata, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You represent Denver, Colorado, the USA, and they should be very proud of you. You've done something fantastic. My last article is rather difficult, and she's done fantastic work, and she had some problems with me. Do you agree, Renata?
Disagreements.
Disagreements, yeah, that's right. That model, do you have questions? No questions.
It was crystal clear.
Very clear.
Excuse me?
I said it was very clear.
Crystal clear.
Thanks to Renata.
Yeah.
I'm not as good as she is, unfortunately. That's why I asked her to do it. Thank you, Renata, once more. Thank you.